Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's Carl Rodriguez here again from Joining the Dots TV, the Startups Network. And today I've got Alex Balderstone with me, who's also representing a network. So it's a good example of how we collaborate and we try to meet the needs of our respective networks by interoperating and collaborating. And Alex, it's really good to have you on the call today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. It's good to bring networks together as always. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a small little planet we're on, isn't it? And
it is, but we'll join up. So
we join them up, and the entrepreneurs are often, I think they get to know certain relationships, and yeah, I mean, we obviously have some shared, things that we know we can send things to each other. So that's been working really well. Do you want to just start off today by obviously telling me, kind of what you get up to on a day-to-day level, and your own background. I know you've had quite an interesting journey to get to where you are today. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks again for having me on. It's always interesting to share insight and updates on how we're doing. I do two things primarily at the moment. My main position is I'm co-founder at a company called Kaiku. We are essentially a platform of about 200 funds, family offices, and high net worths we work with, and essentially a network of a few thousand startups whereby we work with essentially early seed stage companies. We work with them to essentially help them fundraise and get investment ready. That means there's an element of SCIS that comes in their preparation. At times, if we don't think they're ready, more sort of narrative, strategy related work as well. But predominantly, that focus is on fundraising. So that's spread between funds predominantly in the UK and Western Europe and Central and Eastern Europe as well. And then, we're a team of 14 with the equivalent of about 3 full-time. So we have a team spread across Europe as well. So sourcing deals from outside, from partners like yourself, and really sort of just sharing and understanding what's happening in the ecosystem at an agnostic basis. Main thing which I think we're discussing today is more that platform that we're focusing on for now, and hopefully a bit of intelligence behind it, and what we're aiming to do there. And the other part of what I do is I'm a venture director at an accelerator called Birmingham Enterprise Community. It's become one of the fastest growing accelerators in the Midlands region, based in Birmingham at Alpha Tower. And really different but interesting basis, working in the region. Completely different basis, working with businesses from university to on a current accelerator at the moment. We've got businesses from the US to Costa Rica to Italy. We've now got 4 programs running in parallel. Recently won an Innovate UK grant, and a completely different subset of what we're doing there as well, but also responsible for raising a micro fund there at the moment as well.
Cool. Yeah, it's amazing how you do. One of the things you mentioned there in the Birmingham Venture is just how so many companies and organizations internationally are just interacting, and it's become such a normal thing now, really, isn't it?
Well, it is more so with, I suppose, even pre-COVID, with the development of HS2, 5G, the Commonwealth Games. We're not, London's not actually that far from Birmingham. At the end of the day, you can get there in an hour and 15 minutes on the train. And so, what we find is, more of our focus is moving to scale up territory at the moment, ideally where we'd like to keep more people remaining in the Midlands region. And, at the end of the day, people don't realise things like Coventry, for example, has got one of the largest aeroclusters in Europe. Matters like that you want to bring companies from outside and, make Birmingham, really a home for innovation and tech.
Yeah, I was spending quite a lot of time up there last year and saw a lot of good.
It's a good time. A lot of what's been clustered is coming together now. The first Birmingham Tech Week was last year, at the end of last year. So there's really a good wave to ride on at the moment.
Yeah, and it's a big city, isn't it? And I mean, there's a lot happening. Like you said, Commonwealth Games, HS2, motorways, all sorts of things going through. And a very good Indian restaurant, which I still haven't been to, but I know it's very good from the smell.
Next time I'm up.
in the big station, what's it called? Anyway.
We'll put it in the comments.
Yeah, we'll put it in the comments. It's another Birmingham jewel. Come to Birmingham. All right. So, Alex, you're right. I want to pick your brains a bit on this, evolution of what Kaiku is becoming, because I know you guys have been really good at building a community, which I think, is step one in sort of ecosystems, and people are getting more familiar with the value of them. You've done very well, like you said. You've got thousands of startups, and then you've got a good investor community that trust you. And I know myself, that takes time to build some of those good relationships. They trust you, and they can have the right sort of information. But you guys are really taking it, I think, to the next level, building on having a cluster of organizations finding each other in a sort of marketplace format. Do you want to just go into a bit of, just give us the sort of basics of how you're taking that, some of the insight that you're starting to generate into a, kind of almost a smarter version of the existing?
Sure. And I think, you hit the nail on the head quite well at the beginning. A big part of that is building up community. The whole aspect of Kaiku got a lot more serious for us in September, October last year. So a big part of that was building up trust with funds, and, the same with deal flow. And equally, the fact we've now done about, virtual events included, 17 odd events in about 5-6 different countries. And it's helped by the fact that we work with a lot of funds all over the place, and you build out that ecosystem. But as part of that, you obviously start to learn that Spain has got a completely different ecosystem to the Baltic, which is much more deep tech focused, for example, or Iberia is, its own sort of subsection compared to, to London. And equally in the UK, we're so clustered with regards to where the regions are. You see that with the work, that goes on up in Birmingham too. But, as you say, and without being the guy that is wholly focused on the product and the sort of development angle of what we're doing, we've got to start being a lot more intelligent, because you see hundreds and hundreds of decks, and it's great because, you learn from it where things are. But what you've got to do with that, it's equally where we're not a fund, but it's equally where a lot of funds, start to pitch themselves at the end of the day as being clever, with that sourcing. So, I suppose there are a few areas that come in there, and without getting, too technical. The first is, I suppose you could say, more the machine learning process that we're developing, basically, which comes down to the matching algorithm. I think the best benchmark that I can give to anyone to understand is similar to a platform called Lunch Club. Lunch Club was a Y Combinator startup, which essentially is founders meet founders, startups meet other ones they may be wanting hiring, but just sharing conversations at the end of the day. And what you learn from using that, as we have done, I have done twice a week since September, is that you need in simple terms, a supervised learning method to essentially help what you're learning and what you're gathering from essentially the scoring of the people coming on board onto your platform, and making sure that there's a clear thesis between said investor and startup at the end of the day. That's where Lunch Club's a good comparison, and I'd wholly recommend that anyone looks at it, even just for having open conversations, because I think one thing that we've seen through COVID, just for context, is obviously funds, angel networks, everyone alike, angel investors have been starting to look at, actually, have I been making the right decisions? Do I need to be a lot tighter with my purse strings as well? And beyond a lot of funds putting more funding directly into their portfolio, that means it has in some ways changed a bit in terms of the remit, in terms of where they're looking. So for us, we've spent, I suppose you could say, quite a lot of time in the last few months actually looking at what those data points are and what is important, and are they good predictors of what a good match means at the end of the day. Now, that it is intrinsically quite a difficult thing to do when you've got a really basic ML-driven algorithm at the beginning, and that's something that we will have to train over time, because we do have a big number of data points, but at the end of the day, they're spread all over the EU and Western Europe in effect as well. And what we may see in Birmingham is wholly different to London to what we may see in Barcelona. So part of that as well is more sort of, I suppose you could say, the unsupervised approach to learning. So that's separating data into multiple clusters based on certain characteristics as well. And in turn, that, I suppose you could say, gives a clear distinction between potential investments by grouping them into more set groups and set clusters with similarities there as well. So the fintechs, insurtechs, the legal techs as well. So, a big part of us at the moment is actually saying, right, we are agnostic in scope of where we look at, but actually, if we haven't done much, and this is just pure example, in say blockchain, crypto space, or more sort of legal tech, actually, would we be stronger in focusing on a few more demographics as opposed to, lots out there as well? And typically that's obviously what you'll find with most funds. Most will come from corporate venture capital backgrounds and have a specific focus. And a big thing with that comes into actually more portfolio support, in the sense of, right, do we have an advisory network that can support those going along as well? And again, without being set up as a fund, because that's not what we do. We act as a sort of more communication side for the intermediary, and decisions get made by the investors at the end of the day in the funds, and they do their own due diligence. We want to be more intelligent with that, because once we understand more of what the funds are looking for, we can help train that process as well, just in terms of how that's going along. And I think the last thing really on the matching is what these called more reinforcement learning. So again, it's more the customer feedback, as you would say, or the investor feedback into the algorithm, and allows the ML system at the end of the day to adapt its decision making based on more feedback that we get going in and out. And actually, going back to what I was saying on Lunch Club, you would have a match at the end of the day, and afterwards you'd receive a very simple email that says, have you enjoyed the conversation? Has this met the thesis? What were the problems? And without overcomplicating it, and without trying to put text in, because that gets a lot more complicated to start understanding that, we can then start scoring a lot of this as well, and train more of the algorithm over time to go with that too.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And one big thing that's coming to me is the idea that this is something, obviously you're starting off now, but the compound benefits that will come from it as it evolves, and as you get smarter and smarter, and how, I suppose, something that has been a bit, like they say, who and it's all a bit manual in the way that people match each other up, and being able to spot those clusters geographically and also by
precisely. And it's actually interesting, because in some ways as well, you want to use this from a sourcing perspective too, and very different, but EF does a similar thing. 1,000 applications a year, it's probably gone up since the last time I've read, and trying to choose 100-ish founders. They've obviously got a big database of past founders that they've looked at as well. So there are aspects at the end of the day in terms of sort of I suppose you could say AI driven web crawling at the end of the day, to look outside of immediate startup hubs to make sure that there's no bias, really to the areas that we're looking at. And on the side, that's a big thing that we try and do with the referral network and people that we work with, to make sure that we do have a spread. So we do see what's coming outside, say, London and the southeast. And yeah, sure, there is a big majority that comes down here as well, but I think a lot of that comes down to who you're trying to find. And that does get more complicated over time, and is not an immediate use case that we're aiming to develop, but it will do in time for sure.
What do you find? I mean, in terms of your day to day, you're in this classic kind of marketplace position where you're in between sort of startups and investors, and they've both got their own priorities and ways of doing things. What's the kind of message that if you could say one thing to, let's say, the investor community, what's something you find is kind of really important that they hear?
I think it's a bit of both. Reciprocal is in terms of one line of feedback, 2 lines of feedback can really go a long way at the end of the day. And I think that's a lot. A lot of really good positive investors do give feedback, and we pass that on. And as we say, it does go a long way. And it is rare nowadays. But I think we're still struggling to see platforms that allow for that element of feedback, because at the end of the day, obviously the process, you have to remember, 90% of who we work with are institutional, pre-seed and early seed stage VC funds. At the end of the day, they all have their own thesis, and they all intend to, the normal VC process is said founder goes out, they go to 100 funds, and then they may get 2 or 3, 4, 5, whatever meetings or whatever, and 1 or 2 decisions back off that. That's just the numbers that you've got to work off. And at the end of the day, that's direct fund to direct startup founder relationship, as opposed to gathering all of that together and looking at the market as a whole, as opposed to just a direct relationship between both parties. And that's one part of obviously what we're trying to do, is group that together. And yes, sure, a Bowhurst could show you that, in a Crunchbase, but at the end of the day, it's not the same thing, because more of them are focused on sort of parts of the CRM process, more part of it's data aggregation, but you've still got to have manual input there as well. And to be honest, again, it's not an immediate use case, but you start to look at the due diligence side of things as well. And for us at the time being, that's something that will come in time for sure, because it's a more complex procedure. But that comes down to really 1, information discovery, and 2, information synthesis, and then you've got to focus on result clustering, and I suppose you could say subject identity resolution, which really means you need to look at the data points that you've got, exporting them and sorting them into sort of third-party systems, and then trying to reduce the time that there is an individual on the other side understanding this, because that's the problem with the due diligence process at the end of the day. It's so time-consuming in terms of where it's broken down. And there are certain platforms in place that do that, but again, the end-to-end process does not join all of this up still.
Awesome. All right. Well, look, I mean, it's great to get this update today. And I think actually one last thing I'm going to just, we touched on it at the beginning, maybe just as an ending point. I know we've had chats about, this international aspect of how companies are interconnecting and wanting to find new clients in other countries, and investors can be in other country, no problem. I mean, how are you finding that aspect of things in terms of internationalization?
I think it's been positive the last 3 months. Actually, we've taken a load of really new positive relationships from funds, for example, in Central and Eastern Europe, Iberia, and sort of really developing, I suppose, insights and oversight that funds over in those regions have in the UK as well, because they do often get missed out, and there's, I suppose you could say, information asymmetry in terms of what they're seeing in their their countries as opposed to over here as well. And I think we've been seeing more appreciation of that, coming into looking outside of, borders. Equally, funds from Asia, as part of that as well. And part of the trend, I would say, valuations coming down as, part of, other funds from outside the immediate European Union wanting to look at, okay, can they snap up an opportunity because the valuation's gone down? And what does that mean for them as well? So I think it's a really fun time, a really positive time for that as well. If we could, we'd be doing obviously events all over the place as we can as well. Again, that comes with time. You have to have someone else on the ground to manage those clusters, and for us, predominantly the focus is UK, Western Europe for the time being. So
all right, well, brilliant. It's been really interesting to talk.
Snappy, but a few insights hopefully that are useful.
Yeah, so. Well, there's definitely, I mean, I think the whole point of this network as well is it's full of pioneering people, and you're obviously one of those people who's, I find it fascinating that people have got the idea of the value of an ecosystem, but now it's like how they're actually going to evolve and be increasingly useful and smart. And
well, that's the thing, right? I think a lot of people rush out and think I've got to build the next best thing without having a community in place anyway, or having any form of a brand or any sort of partnerships there and things like that. So I think that's a big thing. And obviously we've had COVID in between, so that's been a big thing that's defined what we're doing. But it's given us time to sit back, look at the back end, and actually go, no, we can try and do something more of this, or try to at least. So.
Okay, and we're going to put the website links and so on, obviously, in the description down below the video. But and maybe your contact details. I'm sure they're on there.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, yeah.
And keen to talk to anyone more who's got an insight into this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody get involved. This is a fascinating time where we can shape the future, as we say. So, thanks, Alex.
Thanks a lot, Carl. Really enjoyed that. Cheers.
Take care. See you.